To grow up on a cliffside edge in Newfoundland is to understand a very specific type of isolation. At Tides Point, guarding the entrance to Mortier Bay, survival was never an individual effort. It was what my relative, Irene Dicks, called a total family commitment. Before the roads were cut, there was only a footpath through the thick brush. A small farm operating on the very brink of the cliffs and the constant, heavy heartbeat of the fog alarm. For generations of my family, this rock wasn't just a workspace. It was home. And in the winter of 1941, it became the thin line between life and death for 5 men dying in the dark. November 2nd, 1941, midnight. A German U-boat torpedo splits the British merchant ship SS Larpool in half, 250 miles out in the freezing Atlantic. Chief Officer W.V. Hopper scrambles into a tiny open lifeboat with 4 crew members. For 11 days, the ocean showed them no mercy. Hopper's private logs tell a story of absolute desperation. By November 6th, their mast had snapped in a violent squall. They fought to repair it using just an axe and nails. But Hopper wrote, "Our hands had lost all power to grip anything. The wet and cold were turning their limbs useless." The next day, desperate for warmth, they struck one of their precious lifeboat matches to light a small fire out of dry refuse in a bucket. The dampness choked it out in minutes. Starving, severely dehydrated, and suffering from gangrene, Hopper lay in the freezing spray, hallucinating a great steaming jug of hot cocoa sitting right alongside him in the boat. They were drifting blindly into Placentia Bay, completely spent. On the late afternoon of November 13th, daybreak broke flat, calm, but choked with dense fog. Out on the water, Officer Hooper heard a rhythmic sound. At first, he thought it was just his own wooden mast creaking in the swells, until he timed it and realized it was a mechanical fog alarm. They fired their last 3 distress flares into the grey sky. On the cliffs above, 8-year-old Irene Dicks was playing outside. She saw the flash through the fog and ran to her father, Keeper John Dicks. He and assistant Billy Joe Power dashed down the steep cliffs to Tides Cove just as the lifeboat grounded on the shingle beach. The sailors sprawled out and immediately collapsed on the surf, their legs completely useless from exposure. John and Billy Joe hauled them from the water, built a fire in a fisherman's hut, and John risked driving his car over boulder-strewn footpath in the pitch dark to get them to the Burin Hospital. Hopper gave young Irene the ship's first aid kit. Decades later, the scissors from that kit remain a family treasure. Pulling back from the high edge of Tides Point, you begin to see just how tight the margins of survival really were on this coast. The distance between the light station and the safety of the beach is only a fraction of a mile, but in a winter gale with useless limbs and an open boat, that short distance was an absolute chasm. This is the exact stretch of water that Keeper John Dicks and Billy Joe Power had to navigate in the pitch of darkness of that November night. No flashlights, no paved roads, just the instinct of men who knew every jagged rock and every shift in the tide by heart. When the lifeboat finally grounded on the shingle here in the cove, the crisis didn't end. The British sailors were alive, but they were entirely broken. Chief Officer Hopper wrote that the first man to crawl out of the boat fell flat into the freezing water. His legs were completely useless from exposure and gangrene. It was right here on this quiet beach where the keepers built a fire in a small fisherman's hut. They poured spring water and handed out fresh scones made by the keeper's wife. It was a brief, fragile moment of comfort after 11 days of absolute horror. But on this peninsula, comfort is always temporary. The sea is always waiting. There is a strange duality to places like Tides Cove. To the strangers on the SS Larpool, these rocks represented deliverance. They represented a miracle, the place where the fog opened up and gave them back their lives. But the ocean doesn't keep a tally of who it saves and who it takes. The same tides that carried those 5 men to safety would return to this exact shoreline decades later with a very different purpose. Because the history of this place isn't just a collection of old wartime logs, for my family, the story of these waters is bound to a much heavier cost.
Sometimes you think about the way all that happened to them, you know. It's the same.
For some reason, I always thought Herring Cove was over just a little bit further. I didn't realize it was just right there.
And this part here.
Yeah.
And we used to take a path up there, and then we get up there, we go down over rocks, and we're in Tides Point then. Irene Pearcey. Yeah. She got a good memory of it, if it rolled or something. She did lived it. They lived down here.
So what year was it? It was 73?
Dad died.
Yeah.
You were born 72, and it had to be within the first year of your.
Yeah, I think you said I was 8 months old.
Yeah. Gotcha. So let's see. Here's treasure. There's just no words for it. Worked on the draggers all his life. He used to work up in Moonburg and all those places too, right? And but when he got on down here, we danced the storm. It's the only way to put it. We're so happy that he had it close to home and safety, everything, right?
Yeah.
And I managed that so well.
So what happened there? He was looking for birds in the winter, was it? Turs,
Yeah, it was turs or something. And I'm trying to remember. He leaned too far or something, fell out in the water. All of us children, and then he gets time on his hands that where he can hold it, and, he thought the world of it. It was too bad. That got short-lived on his part.